the Disney company at Imagineering since 1980. I was hired during a big hiring push for people that were going to work on Epcot Center. I was hired in a very simple capacity as a model builder in the model shop, and at that time the model shop was the place where most of the designs were worked out. We worked out the designs in 3 dimensions, real 3 dimensions, not like the modern virtual 3 dimensions. My father was a cameraman. I'd been raised around film sets, and so I'd sort of seen illusions all my life. And was very comfortable with this idea of all these things that look really real, but they're not made of real stuff, and they look like they're there, but they're not really there, and they only look real if you look at them from here, and if you stand over there and look at them, they look totally fake. That was very familiar territory for me. And so I taught for several years after I got out of college, and I think I was probably a little young to be teaching high school because I felt like I didn't have enough life experience to really be talking to people who were 3 years younger than me. You know, so I went looking for this job, and at the time there was an executive, one of the chief executives, an engineer for Imagineering, who had come. I was teaching his kids in this high school, and he came and said, "Son, you're wasting your time here. You should be working for Walt Disney Imagineering." And I thought, I can't imagine that the Walt Disney Company would ever hire a person who looks like me. Because I'm considerably more conservative looking today than I was then. But you know, put together your portfolio and bring it on down. So I thought, all right. And at first I thought, I'm not going to do that. It can't possibly be real. About another year working at the school, and you know, if you've been involved with education and the arts, you can imagine there's only so much humiliation you can take. You know, my first year teaching, I taught in a closet. I taught art in a closet with no windows, no sink, no cabinets, about the size of one of these rows back 2/3 of the way. You know, and of course they dump all the problem students into art class, who I loved. I thought they were great, but it was a little too small of a space to be locked up with them. So after a while of that, I thought, you know, I'm ready to try something new. I'll put my portfolio together. I'll send it in there. I got a job in the model shop, and I started working. And my first job was on the Mexico Pavilion, and I developed the pyramid. When you go inside and you see the pyramid that's across the water, I worked on that. Some elements within the ride. Worked a lot with Herbie Ryman, who's an old Disney legend. And so I was there for a while doing a variety of things. As I said, I worked on the Mexico Pavilion, I worked on the Norway Pavilion, I played the Dreamfinder in that little Dreamfinders theater blue screen thing. You know, all kinds of things. And I found myself, as the years developed, sort of ending up working on a lot of kind of non-theme park, off-brandy kind of things. And towards the end of that period of time, we built the Adventurers Club, which was the first thing that really I was in charge of as a designer, was the Adventurers Club, which, you know, has weird similarities to Animal Kingdom in ways, if you really think about it. In that, you know, it has a lot of real stuff in it. You know, it has this kind of global culture thing. It has this kind of subversive counterculture thing. There are a lot of interesting themes that I wouldn't have been aware of that now you stand back and go, oh, that's kind of interesting. Michael Eisner, not me, Michael Eisner has this idea that we should do a park about animals. And he didn't have a very strongly formed notion other than people love animals, people love Disney animals, you know, we've got the Magic Kingdom, we should have the Animal Kingdom. End of story. And a group of business analysts had taken that mission, and they'd gone out and they'd spent, you know, a tremendous amount of money and about a year's worth of time analyzing this proposal, and come back with a 400-page document that basically said, don't do this. This is a bad idea. You know, there's too many zoos in the country already. They struggle for money. They're subsidized by cities. They're subsidized by volunteer labor. They're, you know, everyone can go visit a zoo in their own hometown. Why would they fly across the country to go to another zoo? It's difficult to acquire the animals. There's liability issues, blah, 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 blah. A million reasons why, you know, you don't want to build another zoo. So we got this 400-page document, and I thought, and I got this mission of, think about this idea about this animal thing. We got to do something. And so my thought was, well, I have this, document I could never afford to pay for. It had focus groups. It had, all this math and stuff like that. And it basically describes everything not to do. If you do anything in this book, someone's going to say no. So don't do the things that are in this book. And so we directed the thrust of the development of the park to definitely be a theme park, which ended up kind of surprising for me because I hadn't really worked a lot in theme parks. I've been working on all this off-theme park stuff. It took a long time to get real serious backing. I mean, we started in 1990 and the capital authorization was signed in 1995. That's kind of a long development cycle. And then it just started getting built. What we did, which was kind of sneaky, you stand up and say, we can do this. Why, we can make this a unique and interesting park, and it will be wonderful, and it'll have live animals, and it'll have make-believe animals, prehistoric animals, science and conservation. And then the very next thing we have to do is stall, because we know nothing about live animals, dinosaurs, conservation, right? But we do know about theme parks and fantasy. So the first thing we did was develop the most Disney-like branded aspects of the park for about 6 months. And we'd vamp on the other stuff. Well, we said, just in case you were worried that this thing couldn't be Disney branded and it couldn't incorporate these ideas that you're familiar with and they feel safe and they feel like something that we know we can own, look at all these rides and attractions you could do in this park about animals that have either to do with existing Disney fantasy animals that we know, animal characters we know and love, subjects we've already handled. So we did all that. Meanwhile, we're traveling all around the country, going to zoos, meeting and building a network of supporters within the zoological and conservation community, finding out what we don't know, who do we need to know that from, building a network of advisors, and both there and then with the dinosaur thing as well. And then trying to figure out the whole live animal experience safari aspect of this thing. And so we sort of proceeded backwards through the development of the park, where the safaris were the last thing that we developed, when we really felt like now we had a network of support, we had advisors, we had technical knowledge. It was probably a year and a half before we really got down to defining those safaris in any kind of detail. While we got all this other information. You guys have probably all heard the tiger story. I'll tell you the true tiger story. So now when someone else tells you that I rode into a room on a tiger and it jumped onto the conference table, you say, that didn't really happen like that. Okay, here's what happens. And this happens to projects all the time. You have to understand, there's these real spikes and valleys in the development of a project where there'll be a 6-week period when everyone is talking about your project and it looks like it's going to happen and everything's lined up and the stars are aligned and you're going to build it. And then there'll be this valley where nobody's talking about your project and it's never going to happen and everyone's depressed and it's not going to happen. And then there's another peak where, no, now the stars are lining up again, our projects are going to get built. And it just goes on like this. We're in one of these things where this slowly has emerged this buzz that is, well, are animals really that interesting? What's so interesting about animals? Maybe animals aren't that interesting. Maybe it's not that interesting to just look at animals. Are animals exciting to look at? Maybe they're not exciting to look at. Thinking, how did we get here from the basic premise of, animals, Disney, let's build a park? So we thought, okay, we're going to need to effectively demonstrate that animals are inherently interesting and exciting to look at, especially when the sense of containment of the animal has been, minimalized. You don't really have a strong sense that you're looking at a caged animal or a bounded animal. And so we contacted one of the people that supply animals for film shoots, and I want, incidentally, just one lesson in navigating the world of a corporate environment. We did not tell anybody that we were doing this. Nobody knew we were doing this. Because, of course, what would they say? They would say, absolutely. So, therefore, they could not know. And they did not know. And they are free to this day of any liability associated with this decision. So, You know, the meeting's going to happen. It's all about the safaris. Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, everybody else. You can imagine this army of people come in, they sit down. So I'm standing just like I'm standing in front of you, and I start my rap about the safaris and animals, and there seems to be this issue of, is it interesting, blah, blah, and I want to remind you that you're going to see these animals, and you won't really perceive them as being in cages, you won't really perceive them as blah, blah, blah. While I'm saying this tiger comes in the room behind me. Now the tiger's on a chain, but really, is that going to stop the tiger? No. That's for psychological comfort. But the tiger just walks into the room behind me, right? Everyone sees the tiger. I never see the tiger. I never saw the tiger. I was talking. I'm talking blah, 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 blah. Tiger comes in behind me, sits down over there, like peripheral vision, maybe I see the tiger, sits down, scratches himself, gets up, walks out of the room. That was the end of the whole discussion of, you know, exciting, not exciting, interesting, not interesting. So anyway.